All right, guys, I'm getting so tired with all this Ukrainian stuff because it's all just one political farce with everyone wanting interest in resources in Ukraine and all this nonsense. And aren't we supposed to be broke? This is a better video right now for me. Let's hear it. How America got so good at buying shit. Sorry. How money works. I love these guys. They do good videos. Let's hear it. Why is the US buying so much stuff and everyone's having such a difficult time with the cost of living and everyone's broke? What's happening? What's the deal here? I mean, I see the logo there with Afterpay, so maybe we get a good idea that everyone's just on credit, right? Let's hear it.
Americans are the best consumers on the planet, and it's really not even close. The runner-up is China, and they spend less than a third of what we do in any given year, even though they have almost 5 times as many people. It might not always feel like it, but by global standards, we are incredibly rich. We love buying shit, and we aren't afraid of going into debt to keep doing it. More of our economy depends on the consumption of goods and services than basically any other major country in the world. But this has to have a limit, right? As a direct result of our own insatiable desire to consume, our household savings rates are now the lowest they have ever been, and high-risk, high-interest consumer lending has surpassed $1 trillion.
Yeah, it is what it is.
That doesn't include things like car loans, home loans, student loans, medical loans, or informal lending like buy now, pay later, which are also approaching all-time highs. So what is going to happen to the best consumers on the planet if they can't afford to consume anymore? And more importantly, could we solve all of our problems by just buying less shit?
The ocean of debt is getting deeper, but there are indications that some are doing a better job treading water.
Americans taking on more auto loan debt than ever before. It's probably because they're just rejoicing in the fact that they can get a car again.
Holy bejeez, I don't know if I can do this, but I need the car.
Amazon, Target, and Walmart are already offering discounts to consumers.
Don't make enough money to meet the minimum cost of living in New York City, and nearly 80% of households are considered housing burden, which means more than 30% of household income is going towards rent.
I mean, that's crazy.
According to data from the World Bank, America is responsible for about a third of all consumer spending worldwide, even though we only represent 4% of the global population. According to the same report, consumer spending is now 69% of our total economy. For comparison, in the second largest consumer market in the world, China, consumption only accounts for 38% of their GDP.
Yeah, and the European Union doesn't even count because that's a collection of countries. I don't even know why they put that in statistics like this or in graph, whatever. I mean, it's like, because you have the European Union up here, right? And then you have Italy, the United Kingdom, France, Germany. They're all, that makes more sense, right? Which, by the way, they're really high. So I get the European, but that's a collection. Why do you put it? Why do you put it there? You know.
Now that might be a bit of an unfair comparison. Outside of its major cities, China still has a lot of people who are very poor and don't buy things beyond the bare essentials. The European Union is a more comparable peer, but when counted as a single group, only 51% of their GDP is tied up in consumer spending, and as time goes on, they are spending less and less while we are spending more. By basically any metric, Americans are the best consumers on the planet, and this wasn't by accident. After the Second World War, America had a problem. The industrial juggernaut we had built up to fight the war in Europe and the Pacific no longer needed to make planes, tanks, ships, and munitions for the war effort. After the Great Depression, the government really didn't want to let these factories go idle, so it continued policies first pushed by the New Deal to encourage consumer spending to give those factories and their workers something to feed. The problem suddenly became that the market was saturated with goods and services, and there was presumably a limit to what people would buy. It was at this point that modern Mad Men-style advertising became a thing, as companies now needed to create demand rather than just catering to the demand that already existed. A not-so-fun fact is that a lot of the men that honed their craft creating propaganda for the First and Second World War pivoted to advertising where they could use their skills to sell products instead of selling the nation's war efforts. The historian Kenneth Jackson noted in his book Crabgrass Frontier that the year after the war ended, there were only 8 self-contained shopping centers in America. Most purchases were still done at local standalone stores that catered to the essentials for everyday life. Just 14 years later, though, at the start of the 1960s, there were over 4,000 shopping centers across the country, all vying for their sweet, sweet consumer dollars. At this time, most of the other major economies around the world had the more immediate problem of rebuilding their factories and infrastructure that were destroyed during the war. Only after that did they have to start worrying about what to do with their extra industrial output. This gave America a head start in consumerism that has been hard to catch up to. So that's the incredibly brief story about how we got here. But what does this actually mean for us today? Apart from creating a general culture of consumerism, the undermining of personal financial stability, corporate consolidation, resource depletion, and waste generation, there are 3 less obvious but more immediate problems that consumer-first economic policies have created, and 2 very important reasons why we can't really afford to get off the treadmill of consumption. The first problem we slowly created for ourselves is that consumerism made luxury, convenience, and experience cheap, but everyday life expensive. The optimization of industry, combined with globalized trade, finance, and shared expertise, has made consumer goods incredibly cheap by historical standards. Adjusted for inflation in the 1960s, an airline ticket from New York to Europe would cost $6,000, a fridge $4,000, a massive 21-inch color TV was almost $9,000. A home microwave oven produced by Raytheon was $5,000.
Yeah, I remember seeing this as well. It's basically like a TV today is nothing. Nothing in comparison. It costs nothing. And that's why there's a lot of boomers who are like, you're complaining about the cost of living? Just stop buying stuff. That's why you'll be able to save your money. And it's like, no, because their idea of what it used to cost to buy these things was incredibly high. So they think everyone's wasting their money buying these things, when in fact it's just a much lesser percentage of it, of what it used to be, you know?
And even modest home furnishings were worth the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars today. Added together, these consumer goods and services that probably seem pretty basic to you were collectively worth as much as a house.
Yeah.
That's because back then, consumer goods were luxuries. But
look at that. Why does that look better? Why does this look better than today? I don't know. Maybe it's just the camera, man.
Housing was a pretty basic purchase. Today, global industry has made consumer goods extremely cheap, but constrained resources like land very expensive. You could go on an extended European vacation, buy the latest array of electronics and home appliances, and probably spend less than a few months' rent. All of these goods combined wouldn't add up to a down payment on a home in most cities, let alone an outright purchase. Now, hot take alert, but a lot of this stuff is actually pretty great. Fridges, washing machines, and modern computers do make our lives better and easier. Even modern...
Did you see what they put there? That's the Majoram 1, which, by the way, none of you can afford.
Services like, well, you know, YouTube can be great if consumed in moderation. And I am not just saying that because
Or is it? Am I mistaking it for the color base? Sorry.
Dirty, stinking, hypocritical creator. Modern conveniences have improved our lives. And if consumerism stopped there, we could probably have found a happy balance between cheap modern amenities without the trade-offs that came with it. But the problem was, it was almost impossible to stop it there. Building an economy on consumers meant we had to keep on consuming. So it's time to learn how money works to find out what happens when we are finally full.
That's the question.
This video is sponsored by Grammarly, your AI writing partner that helps you write faster and more effectively with high-quality suggestions. You may know Grammarly as a spell and grammar tool, but it goes way beyond that. It integrates seamlessly with your favorite apps, helping professionals communicate more clearly and confidently, and works where you do. Whether you're drafting emails, writing proposals, or even scripting videos, Grammarly's AI features help you go from draft to done fast. No more endless rewrites or second-guessing your tone. For me, writing professional emails used to take forever, but with Grammarly's AI suggestions, I get real-time feedback that helps me sound polished and professional without the stress. One of my favorite features, Grammarly tailors suggestions based on your audience, because writing to your boss is different from texting your friend. Grammarly is completely free to try. Just sign.
Should tell all the federal employees here in the United States just to download it and ask it to put up 5 bullet points of what they've been doing, right? That way they can keep their job.
Up and download using my link in the description. It's the easy and trendy thing to write off consumerism as just a generically bad thing. So as much as I would love to make an easy video about how consuming modern goods and services is everything wrong with the world, there is a little bit more to it than that. A lot of things we consume genuinely increase our standard of living and quality of life. Somewhere between you leaving society behind to live off the land and taking out a buy now pay later loan for a Temu order is some happy medium of spending on consumer goods and services. Economists call this simple idea the law of diminishing marginal utility, where as consumption increases, the additional satisfaction or utility gained from each additional unit consumed falls. Normal humans just call it not overdoing things. And the strongest evidence to support the idea that we are overdoing things is that consumption is actually surprisingly equitable. According to data prepared by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the lowest quintile households spent approximately $1.37 trillion on personal consumption in 2022. The top 20% of households, on the other hand, spent just over $6 trillion. This still means that the wealthiest households are spending more than 4 times as much on consumer goods and services as the poorest households. But that's still relatively equal considering that the top 20% of households earn more than 14 times as much. So, what does this tell us? It shows that for most people, there is a basic level of consumption that is needed to live a normal life. And especially here in America, there are certain expenses that are really hard to avoid. According to the report, the biggest cost for most people was, unsurprisingly, housing. Housing can't be mass-produced in a factory on the other side of the world like most consumer goods, so it's become really expensive. We have already covered that problem. Transport was the other major cost for most households, as in most parts of the country, you need a car to get around, and for low-income households, that is a serious financial commitment. This can also be traced back to the consumer boom of post-war America as lobbying from the automobile industry to build car-friendly cities. And the mass adoption of remote single-family suburban developments meant that most of America was built around the car. The few East Coast cities that are either walkable or have reliable public transportation are unrealistically expensive for low-income households in other ways. So without a lot of sacrifices, most people are forced into owning a car. Personal spending on healthcare is also a uniquely American budget item that pushes up our numbers without really delivering results any different.
I hate that part, the US healthcare. Man, coming from Europe, I just, everyone's like, yeah, no, we don't want healthcare to be paid through tax. Oh, that's socialism. And I'm like, well, am I stupid? But who pays for the police and fire? Is that not a form of socialism through tax? Or am I wrong? Like, who pays for that shit? I might be an idiot. Like, you tell me if I'm wrong.
Different from those godless freedom-hating Europeans. Either way, it's easy to blame consumerism on consumers, but a lot of these expenses are extremely hard to avoid, even if people don't have the money to pay for it. According to the same report, this consumption of the bare essentials meant that the bottom 20% of households were spending $727 more than they made after tax every year. Now, you might be wondering, how can a household spend more money than it makes every single year? The answer is debt, of course, but also the people in the bottom 20% change every year. If someone loses their job and it takes them a while to get work again, they may end up in the bottom 20% temporarily until they find a new job and jump back up to whatever income bracket they were in before. This means that they will go through their savings or rack up debt to keep themselves functioning, but they should be able to recover once they are back on their feet. An inconvenient side effect of this consumer-driven debt is that people in debt also make for better, more motivated workers because they need to work or else. Studies by the National Institute of Health found that workers with high levels of debt were less likely to change jobs, more likely to work unpaid overtime, and less likely to make demands for better pay and benefits.
What a great outcome, right? Don't we all love that? People who work overtime without being paid. That's great, no? Great for the economy. Increased GDP. Slavery. Let's go. Let's just go back to slavery. How about that? Maybe just fast track everything. Let's all just put shackles on again and whatever. Just bring it back, yeah.
Now, even if you are responsible with your borrowing, it can be really hard to maintain modern living standards as more of what we consume transitions to being subscription-based. Even if you save diligently for purchases, sometimes it's not even possible to pay upfront anymore. So you need a regular income to make sure you can cover next month's round of automated deductions from your bank account, whether it can be from American Express, Netflix, Hulu, Afterpay, your student loans, car loans, AT&T, Adobe Creative Cloud, Microsoft Game Pass, Peloton, or if you are a true power consumer, all of them at once.
Peloton has subscription. That's crazy. Anyways, the thing is, when I came to the US from Europe, and I realized everything was credit-based and there was actually a credit score, I was like, what the hell is this? And then, initially I was being told, yeah, you should get a credit card. Yeah, because you need to get your credit score. You need, that's just how it is what it is. That's how the US works. And I was like, hell no. I don't care. I don't want a credit score. Fuck all that. I don't want to play that game. Even if I lose in the end, I don't care. I don't want to play it. I've literally had like 6 American Express letters come in the mail telling me to get this and that. I'm like, I don't want to. It's such a headache. Oh yeah, but you can get for points and then you get free vacations and It's if you play the game right, you can get ahead. I'm like, nah, fuck that game. I just don't want to play it. And then I bought my car cash. It's used, so don't think I'm some rich dude paying 40K or whatever the heck it is, or more even, for a car. No. I bought a used car, $7,000, with 100,000 miles on it. It's been working amazing. I love it. And I own it. That's the thing. I own it. That's the difference. It's not flashy. It's not the US model. It's nothing like that. But it works. It gets me around, and I love it. Stop buying useless shit on credit.
If you lose your income for any reason, you don't actually own anything to tide you over, so it's a lot easier to fall behind a lot faster. Now, the bad news is that as jobs become less secure, regular layoffs become the corporate norm, and work becomes less formal, most people are going to experience this fun little financial roller coaster at some point in their life career. Data from the Fed showed that at the height of the pandemic-era stimulus, the fastest growing share of retail consumer spending came from low-income earners. This was simply because stimulus checks let them make purchases that they weren't able to afford before. Since then, growth in spending from high-income earners has more than doubled that of low-income earners. Companies have seen pandemic-era wealth accumulation and gone upmarket on most of their items, catering to the group of consumers that still has purchasing power. So if anybody really has the power to stop their consumption, it's high-income earners. And on an individual level, that's probably a really good idea. A report by the Wall Street Journal has found that the US economy as a whole now depends more on the spending habits of the top 10% than ever before, because they are the only ones that can reliably afford high-margin non-essentials. In such a consumer-centric economy, protecting those rich people who are the consumers becomes the most important objective, even though protecting workers would be a better long-term solution because better paid and more productive workers turn into consumers anyway.
Yeah. But who knows anything about common sense, right? Protect the average person so that they can keep spending and actually have somewhat of a decent life. Nah, that's too complicated.
An alarming amount of extremely high-income earners are living paycheck to paycheck because companies have gotten so good at making sure that there is always something to purchase. Advertising and marketing have grown in line with consumer spending and now by themselves represent as much as 5% of GDP, and the formula has been perfected over the decades. So yeah, a pullback in consumption, especially imported low-quality goods, is probably a good idea as an individual, but on a nationwide level, it could get very scary. Our status as the biggest consumer market in the world gives us a lot of advantages. The reason that America has so many of the world's largest companies is because if you can scale a business to address the entire US market, it's already big enough to be globally dominant. And yeah, as dumb as the current trade wars might seem, we do have a lot of negotiating power because everybody wants access to our consumers. The American economy has been growing much faster than most countries in Europe, and even now most countries in Asia. But more of that than ever is just fueled by consumer spending of increasingly expensive goods and services. It doesn't help that a lot of this spending has been fueled by debt in some variety. Consumers are also fickle beings. Basing so much of our economy on highly indebted consumption means that if people get scared all at once about even the possibility of a recession and decide to be a little bit more careful with their money, that will cause a recession. Eventually, debt can only get us so far, and to be reliable consumers, we need reliable incomes. Unfortunately, the last real problem with this is that a growing share of this consumption is being provided by a rapidly shrinking share of suppliers, which is going to make issues like consumerism almost impossible to unravel. Go and watch this video next to find out just how concentrated our economy has become. And make sure to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
Oh my. Thank you, How Money Works, for that. Let's see what the comments have to say, as always, because they have better things to say than I do. Let's be real. You brought up a key point. Consumer goods used to be luxuries and daily living was affordable. Now it's flipped. Daily necessities like rent and luxury high price are luxury high price, and consumer goods like TVs are cheaper. That's the thing. We're spending all our money on the basics. I was a child when my father traveled to the US for the first time. He always said since, Americans will buy a banana peeler if you invent one. Oh man, it's not even wrong. That's the thing. Like, I know that a lot of people from the U.S., you know, they're making all this money, and it's for them it seems like this easy thing, and they don't understand how easy they've had it in some sense in the past. A lot of people are going to hate me for saying stuff like that. You could literally sell anything here. And there's still a part of a truth of that today. But I do see that people are starting to want to spend less on things. And that's a dangerous thing for the US. Because the whole US, like he says, is based on the fact that people are willing to pay for practically anything. Who was it? Immortal Technique, who's a legendary rapper. He was like, look, if you can, and I think it was, if you can create chocolate covered roaches, it's gonna sell. Wasn't it something like that? My high school economics teacher made a great point. He told us, he noted in a class that the US consumes a third of the world's goods. He then asked if this was too much. One student, I don't know what this is, opened that it wasn't, and that we still have 2/3 to go. Holy shit. The Klarna ad on this video is really the cherry on the top. Furniture used to be handmade, albeit expensive. Even so, there was a pride of having furniture outlive you and passing it down to the next generation of siblings, relatives. Yeah, that's the thing. There's also planned obsolescence, right? Where things are just running out quicker and you're going to have to rebuy it. It's that thing as well, like this idea that you either buy a bit more of expensive shoes and they outlast and they basically last a long time, or you have to buy new shoes every year, 2 years or whatever, and you end up spending more over time. But you don't have a choice, right? Because you don't have the money at the moment to buy the more expensive shoes. And that goes for any product. Cars. Now furniture can barely make it out of the box retailer store by falling apart because it's made out of crappy particle board and substandard glue. That's right. Enshittification is another word for planned obsolescence as well. Has a major role. It leads to the addiction to consumption. Even then, the people who are supposed to create these products also are having a hard time not having another choice because we just don't have the money, or most of us don't have the money to buy the better goods. And so they create shittier things. And this goes all the way down to shittier housing, which I see because I'm a real estate photographer. And I go around and I see these homes, literally sliding doors on $1 million homes that won't even slide correctly. Stairs on $1 million holes that are falling apart when I step on them. Popcorn ceilings on $1 million homes. Like, what the hell, man? I'm trying to become a terrible consumer. Essentials went from affordable to pricey while non-essentials went from pricey. Yeah, exactly. Wages are not keeping up with inflation and cost of living. College, housing, etc. All right, last one. It's like what George Carlin said about American consumerism. By the way, he's an amazing comedian. If you haven't heard about him, go search him up. He's funny. It's their civic duty, consumption. It's the new national pastime. Fuck baseball, it's consumption. The only true lasting American value that's left, buying things. How sad is that? Buying things. People spend money they don't have on things they don't need. Money they don't have on things they don't need. So they can max out their credit cards and spend the rest of their lives paying 18% interest on something that costs $12.50. That's Klarna for you. It's or there's more than that, but I don't want to be sued for defamation, but there's so many cases of this. You can literally go pay interest on a $10 item. What the shit?